All right, looks like we slowed down a little bit on people coming in. So why don't we go ahead and get into introductions?
Just super quickly, sorry, Dylan, to cut in.
Uh,
So, right before we do that, I do want to point out that I will be monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout this webinar. So please make sure that your chat settings are changed to everyone. It defaults to hosts and panelists. And I am happy to interrupt people. I kind of enjoy it. So please do ask questions. Sorry, Dylan. Go ahead and
I can take it from here.
yeah,
awesome.
go ahead. Take it out.
Cool. Welcome everyone to the webinar, Consolidating GTM Tools, What to Cut and How. I will be moderating. My name is Mikhiel. I'm one of the founders of Seam AI. We're an operational data platform for revenue teams that syncs data across your GTM tools from a single source of truth. We talk to a bunch of revenue teams, and a constant topic is consolidating their stack. And over the last 10 years, there's been obviously a explosion of tools in the space, and it's not an easy stack to unwind. So we wanted to organize this webinar to help folks out and learn from two RevOps experts on how they think about it. So the agenda is pretty simple. We'll start with some tactical stuff. Where do you start? How do you understand what you have? How do you manage the change? How do you select what tools maybe you cut? That's kind of the tactical piece for right now. Then we'll move on to the areas of focus, maybe changes in trends or go-to-market motions or certain categories that maybe are kind of on the chopping block more than others. We'll try and keep specific brands out of this, but we'll see what happens. And then we'll move on to the impact of AI. And this is what I'm really excited to talk about, because there's so much out there right now on AI, but what's real, what's hype, what can you do right now? What can you do right now to purchase AI next year, the year after? So some future looking stuff. Start with some introductions from our panelists. I'll go first. My name, again, is Mikhiel, co-founder of Seam AI. My background is in sales. I worked at Okta for 5 years as the company scaled from 75 million to over $1 billion in ARR. And that experience was amazing, but it also sort of highlighted some of the challenges that come with data as you scale very quickly. And that's really one of the reasons why we started Seam AI. So I'll just be moderating. That's me. Marshall, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Marshall Hamilton. I work for a company called Sprout Social. We're a software-based social media management platform that focuses on engagement, listening, reporting, and analytics within the social media space. I've been with the company for just over 7 years now in a variety of capacities, from sales leader to RevOps leader, to now I've actually transitioned to spearheading and driving our AI adoption internally. So lots of exciting stuff here that is kind of within my wheelhouse. So excited for the conversation. Conrad, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Thank you again for joining today. My name is Conrad Millen. I lead up our marketing operations team at a company called Rippling. It's a HR, sort of a single platform to run your business on, everything from payroll to applicant tracking to performance management. And we're disrupting a pretty legacy world out there with HR software. So really excited about it. I've been in marketing ops for about almost 8 to 10 years, roughly, mostly in all B2B SaaS companies. And I've been at Rippling for a little over a year now. So excited to talk to you about go-to-market tech stack, consolidation, AI, changing it, and all the good stuff we have in store for today.
Cool. And in the chat, feel free to fire out questions. Kamala said she'll call them out if I miss them. Okay, where to start? You see these charts all the time, like the go-to-market stack, the premier tools you should be using. And I think it highlights the challenges that a lot of RevOps teams are facing right now around where do you even start? How do you tackle this thing? All these tools that you purchase, they're evolving, they're changing, there's more feature overlap than ever before. So how do you tackle this problem? Let's go through these questions one by one. So first, how do you audit your current stack? How do you even know what you have? And maybe how do you set up policies in a way that makes it so you don't need to scramble and figure out what you have? You might be just know what you have all the time. I don't know who wants to take this one first. Maybe Marshall. I think we talked about this briefly, so maybe you.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think, for a lot of people working in RevOps, they're inheriting a stack that they maybe didn't build from scratch themselves in many cases. And so there is truly an audit process of reviewing everything that's there and putting homes or labels on the features that are available to you. So we've always done a mapping process of what do you have, and then trying to put them into buckets, both on features, what are we using it for, but what is it capable of? So we understand kind of like the spread of our technology, because that technology changes and new features get added over time. It's a really lengthy process on the first jump, but then it's pretty easy to maintain over time. The other thing is we adopted policies that we prevent any vendor from resting on their laurels. So it's really hard to transition and get rid of a vendor. So we often are spending time doing market evaluations of those vendors. And I shared this with you, is what we do is every 3 years, every market or every vendor we have triggers a market correction. It doesn't matter if we really like the vendor or not, there's a market correction after 3 years of them being a vendor with us. Additionally, on every renewal, we're doing a survey of our user population and saying, hey, what do you feel about this? And if they're below a 7 on that survey, it also triggers a market evaluation. And the goal there is to make sure that we have the best solutions that are fitting the needs of our business, but also that we are really critically looking at what do we have and what do we maybe not need anymore, but also, is this the best solution for the stage or growth path that we're on?
Yeah. Conrad, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add just a simple thought from my side, which is you know, a lot of like marketing and sales software, it normally is a user trying to access like some form of data. If you actually think about truly what people do in these platforms, are trying to look at some portion of data. And the question I always ask ourselves is like, do we actually need a user interface that's separate from, say, their primary CRM or one of their primary tools they work out of day in, day out? And if like, do they just need that other user interface to access that data? If so, I would rather, especially for a large organization like Rippling, or if you work for a scaled organization, the amount of like change management and training resources and things that are dumped into training your field on these products, that I would definitely take an approach of acquiring data separately and not even having users interface with a separate platform. And a lot of times you can actually cut and consolidate technologies with this practice of just ingesting the data, whether you have a warehouse or something of that nature, and then putting it front and face in front of like your field, exactly where they operate and work with in and day out. And you'll find that strategy a lot of times will cut traditional softwares that you've inherited that users log into. And I recommend it in your practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know that in my selling experience, there's so many sales tools with a separate UI that just gets you a look into some slice of data. And I've seen a lot of those not get adopted, because it's like, you live in Salesforce, you live in Sales Navigator, whatever it might be. How often are you going to go to this kind of separate thing to see this one little piece? Connor, I kind of transitioned into the next question here is, what criteria are you using to determine, hey, this is a good fit or not? Marshall, you mentioned, scores from your users. Conrad mentioned, hey, what is this thing actually doing? Are there other things that you're looking at? Are you measuring ROI on this stuff? Adoption numbers? How do you like balance like renewals and what vendors are, maybe making it hard to churn? Talk to us a little bit about determining, hey, this thing's going to go.
All right, you can go first on this one.
Okay, yeah. So I think normally when things come up into renewal, you really start to ask that question of like, do we need this software? Should we actually keep going forward with it? When I think about the types of questions that come to mind when that happens, is like, are users using it? If so, is there a version of like calculated ROI that we can get out of this product? A lot of times for marketing and sales softwares, as probably folks on this call understand, is like, it's really difficult to allocate an ROI to some of these things, right? And you intuitively know that, oh, this access to this data or this platform or this automation is like, we know intuitively that it's going to help the business. So one of the things you have to do though is really like second guess that question. Like, is it truly driving pipeline or revenue? Is it truly driving efficiency or across the business? Or I really like Marshall's take on like surveying end users to understand, are they actually getting value out of it? From the operations professional mind, it's like, we may not know exactly what they're thinking and how they're using it. And so creating some form of anecdotal, like, dialogue with your end users in your field is probably a really good practice for this stuff.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add on there is kind of going back to that mapping exercise. If you're on a renewal and you see that you've got 4 tools in the SEO bucket, it's a good kind of question to yourself of like, are you maximizing the value of all 4 tools? Like, is there a reason that you have 4, or is there a reason that you can only go down to 1? And beyond usage and adoption, because those metrics can be kind of tough to measure appropriately, kind of questioning the business need for a lot of these tools in this day and age. We used to, 5 years ago, we were in a glut of technology. It's like we could buy anything and all the things. You just shove all the cool tech that you want. And now you're kind of looking a little bit more critically at the stack itself and saying what's business necessary. And I think when you put everything next to each other appropriately and you say, hey, what does this actually solve? And then can we actually quantify value back from it? You get pretty clear answers on what should and shouldn't be cut in that bucket.
We have a couple of excellent inflammatory questions in the chat that I think will start a lot of debate. Yeah. Yeah. If you could take a peek and take a crack at it.
Yeah, we got two from Michael. I'm going to start with the second one because I think it's really fun. They're both fun, but what are the biggest GTM tech stack myths? I'll think about it too.
I think we us at Rippling really try and like pride ourselves on trying to do this effectively. But the biggest thing I've heard in my career is that like people are like Salesforce is the source of truth. And then you've got 20 plus technologies that house data in it. And you don't have a single source of data repository for your warehouse, and data is not normalized. And it's, Salesforce becomes this dumping ground of all these out of the box integrations with your go-to-market tech stack. And it becomes to a point at scale, like unmanageable. And so I think that people will constantly say that, and like you should always pressure test if that's even the fact. And so a lot of what we do is like we do a lot of automation upstream, a lot of cleaning, a lot of everything before we actually push data into CRM that's visible to our field. But yeah, that's probably one of the bigger ones that I've heard.
Yeah, it's good. Marshall, do you have any?
I think Cameron was actually getting at what mine usually is, which is like it's even broader than this. It's like, oh, this one more piece of tech will solve all of my problems. And there's this, we go through trends of different types of technology every couple of years. There's like a new version of outbound. There's a new version of prospecting. There's a new version of signals, and they all have cool brands and names, and you see that kind of bubble up through your teams. It's never really the next piece of tech. It's like what internally needs to change for you to be making the most of the tech you have, or can you get rid of something in order to make that tech more valuable? Because I can tell you is like from a high level perspective, it looks really cool to shove a neat piece of tech into a business. Your end sellers and the people who have to use that tech on a day-to-day basis are like, where am I looking on a day-to-day? Like, I can't do this all. We ask way too much of our sellers and give them kind of this bloated tech stack that we expect them to operate well with.
Yeah. It's not one more tool isn't going to fix your pipeline problem.
Yeah. And I would say like the tool is only as good as a human that's driving it. I think that's like what Marshall's kind of getting at is it's a big portion of it is a lot of these tools aren't just going to plug and play out of the box and solve your problems. And it really takes a human to strategize on it, have a good plan of how to leverage it and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. We adopted a policy at one point, which was tool plus a headcount. Yeah. So like if you're buying a tool, it's the price of that tool plus the price of a headcount to make it effective. Right. And although that's not perfect math, it's actually a good way to get people to critically think about the investment before pulling the trigger on a contract. Because otherwise they might buy it. And to Conrad's point, if you don't have somebody manning the helm, it just kind of languishes.
So Michael had another good question, but I'm going to save it for the next category because it kind of rolls up nicely into one of the questions that I want to talk about. On this same topic, there's a lot of stakeholders in the go-to-market org, like different executives, different teams. You hear a lot about alignment challenges in go-to-market. How do you guys think about navigating that when it comes to tool purchases and tool churns, right? So like maybe there's something that the CRO loves, right? But maybe the adoption's bad, or executive wants to get rid of it, but another one like how do you manage that in RevOps when you're the one setting this stuff up and actually seeing it operate, but there are personalities and opinions maybe at the highest levels. Like, how do you guys think about that and make sure everyone's aligned on this stuff?
I'm happy to take a stab at it, Marshall. So we have over 800 sellers in the field, right? And we've got a marketing org of 100 folks. And so we, when I think about purchasing new technologies and embedding it within the workforce, like all these red flags come up, right? And so the approach that we've really taken is to train the trainer. And so like most companies, the way they operate is like there's two problems. There's one is like the ops person does the training, and a lot of times that can be effective, but then they're on the hook for it. Or the ops person passes everything over to enablement, but enablement a lot of times aren't like overly technical folks and don't know all the nuances of the product to train it. So there's issues of that. And so what we really take the approach of is like if we roll it into a tool, a lot of what we do is we go to our sales directors, SDR managers, all these folks. We actually train them first on the product, everything about it. And then we push the responsibility on them to make their teams effective with that tool. And we find that in the long run, it just makes it way more effective. We don't have to deal as much of like the blowback, and there's not as many things coming to us, and they go to their manager, and that's been pretty effective at scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a fast rollout is a fast fail. It's one of those things where like these things take time. It's a lot of change management. I do think, going back to your earlier part of the prompt though, is like the question of what do you do with your champions of the previous tool? I actually think those are your best champions for the new tool. Like that's the team that you need to win over the best. And so typically what we'll do is find the most ardent users of the tool that we're churning off of, that we're replacing with something else, and convert them first, because they can become huge advocates about why this new tech is better. And I mean, if they come back and they say it's absolutely not better, that's great feedback for you as to why that's gonna have some challenges. But they've been the most ardent supporters of the change, and you can kind of like seed them in as advocates throughout the business to help make that happen.
Yep, that's great. Cool. Last question on this topic. How do you ensure a smooth transition? Like we've talked to, like Conrad mentioned this, where Salesforce might be your source of truth, but there's really a rat's nest of data flows kind of going on between these tools. So from a tech perspective, and you can keep it kind of a higher level, but how are you ensuring that things don't break? And then we've already talked about this a little bit, but like the change management people side, we don't even touch too much on that because I think we did, but from the tech piece, how do you guys make sure that you're not breaking stuff?
Yeah, I'm curious, Marshall, given your background, if you have any thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the breaking stuff, I think it's the idea of a pilot period sometimes feels like you're just slogging through a deployment. It's entirely worth doing a pilot period, both in staging and then production, in order to make sure that you're actually not breaking any technical systems. As your business grows, there's way more hooks into other parts of the company. Like there's far more dependencies at 1,000 people than there are at 100 people. And as your tech grows, all those dependencies matter. And so that kind of pilot period helps you get through like the rockiness of the transition from a technical perspective. It also helps from a people perspective. I think that's the piece that I've learned the most in my career of deploying and launching tools, is working across teams, like the teams that you don't expect to be impacted, to make sure that they're aware and that they are knowledgeable of the tech that you're deploying. You get really cool use cases out of that, but you actually get this really great transition where everyone's really on the same boat figuring out like what you're doing here. I can remember we launched conversational intelligence probably like 5 years ago now, and we literally got up at our all hands and said, if anyone wants a license, like ping me, I'll get you in there. And it was everyone. It was like our engineering team, it was our marketing team, it was our finance team, and everyone got familiarized with the technology. And we generated these really incredible use cases from like just letting people know that this existed and giving them availability and really democratizing that data in a different way. And we've really grown since then to now be able to do cool things like take the data without access, to Conrad's earlier point, and give that data kind of life and purpose in other departments without needing to be in the tool or the UI itself.
Yep. I would add just pilot groups. I think if you're going to break something, break it at a small scale, right? So if you can actually get like some users in the product, test it, whatever it is doing, and try and break something at a smaller scale, it will open things up. Yeah.
That's great. I like that. All right, let's move on. Areas of focus. I think this is where things get a little spicy, but again, let's try and keep it not specific vendors if possible. I think to set this stage up, there's always trends in go-to-market. Things worked 5 years ago that don't work anymore. PLG was really big for a little while, and it still is in some areas, but maybe it's cooled off. There's just AI stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about the categories that you're thinking the most about or seeing trends with, and I can share thoughts on this too. So let's just start point blank. Are you seeing any trends in consolidation or tool categories or specific tool categories that are being looked at the most? Anyone want to start this off?
Go, Marshall. Yeah.
I think the most public one that everyone on this call is probably aware of is this conversational intelligence sales engagement forecasting fight that is like very publicly known. you're on LinkedIn in any capacity, you'll see quite a few teams kind of like battling it out for this mantle. And it makes sense. Like the consolidation is totally justified. Like this is an area where it's one panel of how's your revenue being interacted with and where are the risks. It is interesting to see kind of that transition, and you're getting into the next question of like historically the strategy was always best in breed. What was the best vendor for each individual component of what I'm trying to do? And now you're maybe willing to take a look at a B player for parts of your stack as long as it's under the same roof. And I think the catalyst for that is AI. It's how do I get more of my data into one place in a seamless transition so I can work with it more effectively and do more interesting automations, more interesting insights. Not that you can't do it across multiple vendors, it's just easier when everything's normalized and standardized in the same house.
Yeah. The other big one that I'm seeing across the board is like the HubSpot, or sorry, not to say specific vendors.
No, it's fine. It's fine. That's a big one.
Yeah. Everyone, that's a public one. But CRM and data enrichment vendors consolidating. I think you're starting to see some of the big players absorb other technologies in your stack, whether CRM or whether automation or things on your forms on your website. There's a lot of work happening on that with CRM and marketing technologies like enrichment. And so that's a big piece that I'm seeing. I think the other big one that was really hot, like, 6 to 8 years ago, was this whole sort of predictive account scoring, buying stage, type, high intelligent, like signals for sellers to manage to. And I think those are still decent technologies that will like do okay for your business, but we're starting to see that. Are you going to pay as much for that tool, or are you going to actually focus on trying to build something internally? AI has empowered businesses to build predictive account scoring, lead scoring, do those things at a much faster and more reliable rate than some of these old sort of legacy technologies today. Yeah.
The Michaels are on fire today. I got to give them
Let's
this.
go, Michaels.
We have a couple questions. How many data vendors do you have? So like, and they're also including intent in that and not just firmographic and demographic data.
Yeah,
So
it's like third-party data. So like intent providers, firmographic providers.
yep.
And are we seeing consolidation? I'll pass it off to you guys. I know, Conrad, you guys probably have a ton of data providers.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got probably, I mean, it's tough to say exactly, but let's just say in the realm of like 5 to 10 different data providers. But I want to be really clear about how those are leveraged internally. I would say 90% of those a rep never logs into or a marketer never logs into. They access the data directly within our warehouse or directly within some user interface to that data that we've built internally. And so a lot of times when we buy these contracts, we actually don't look for seats. We ask how many credits can we get, and we want to ETL everything via API into our internal setup. And so I would say like, again, going back to like, these are not like user facing, they're user facing in the point that we want them to be, which is in our CRM. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, I see your raised hand. If you could pop your question into the chat. And then the other question is, people actually want you all to name your favorite vendors and why.
Do it. That's fine.
Good, Marshall. Yeah.
I think just to pile on that first question is like we're in a similar boat. We have probably between 5 and 10 vendors at any given point, and some of it's regional dependent. Like I think there's just this nature of regions and segments and verticals. You end up with like this need for very specialized data that only exists in certain pockets. Same thing with intent. If you think about your geos, like there's just a lot of variety out there. I generally say like most vendors they all have their own issues, right? Like no vendor is perfect. And so there's like this internal policy of we don't try to over question the vendor necessarily, because that's just a lesson in insanity. Like they're always going to find variety of this vendor says this and this vendor says this, and then how do we determine which one's the truth? You can create internal policies around that, but it's a lesson in insanity. It's a huge distraction for your internal teams if they get infighting on data vendors. Vendors that I like are the ones that are the most passive. Like the rep facing vendors that we have 2 that are kind of like rep facing UIs. I tend to not enjoy that just because it's a seat hungry business. And that's creates a more aggressive relationship. We've used demand base on the background for kind of like programmatic enrichment. We've used Clearbit in the past, which is now owned by HubSpot. So we've had kind of like a wider variety of ones. I'll kind of name those out there. On the intent side of things, there's the Six Senses of the world. There's Zoom Infos of the intent. There's quite a few other ones. They're all interesting in their own right, but we've actually found kind of like Marketo lead scoring is effective as anything in terms of people actually joining into our site.
Yep.
Yeah.
We I would say one of the big areas, actually going back to the first question of like what categories are starting to pop up a lot more. I would say there's a lot more vendors that are doing a lot more like web scraping practices. And I think these are starting to come out to be more effective because they're low cost, they're easy to implement and ingest data with, normally are, you know, has easy flexible APIs to connect to. And so we're doing a lot of stuff internally with like web scraping. And so we use a few tools to do this internally. One is like Clay. We use a few other like one-off, very bespoke sort of web scraping technologies. And what we do is we prompt it to go scrape certain things, whether it's a company's LinkedIn, their website page, their whatever it is, and we actually ingest that data and incorporate it into our own internal built predictive account scoring and lead scoring models. And we found these to be really effective because most of it is it's all like basically visible and public data. And so we actually do pretty well with this stuff. I think the data enrichment side, just really quickly too, it's not it's not an or statement, it's an and statement. So I think like if you're a really good business, you know that one tool is not going to give you all the data you need to be effective. And so unfortunately, you do have to pay the price a little bit to bring on multiple vendors to get the data coverage that you want. But I would keep in mind again that constant question of do I need reps to interface with this other tool, or can I find cheaper ways and more cost-effective ways to get the data?
Yeah. I think the web scraping is a really interesting direction that the world's going in. I think it could effectively make a lot of the firmographic type providers like less effective, right? If you can scrape that data from a source that company maintains or that person maintains, it's just going to be more accurate. And like the gap there is emails and phone numbers. Like that's a hard thing to get otherwise. But we're working with a bunch of customers that want to take this scraped data and use AI to summarize it in some sort of capacity. And I'm curious to watch where that goes, because I think it could be way more powerful than, you know, I'm not sure how all the data vendors get the data, but if you can just scrape it off a website, you know, it's going to probably be more accurate.
And Camilla said a really good point there. I think there's, you know, the world is moving more private. There's more privacy regulations and cookie consent laws and things like that coming into place. And so I think public data and information is going to be definitely like the process for the future, I think. And so I just wanted to call that out, that is changing quickly from the marketing side. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So we talked about this a little bit. I want to talk about it a little bit more. Kind of the all-in-one platform for best of breed, because best in breed, you still hear that from time to time. You also hear, you know, the compound startup, this phrase of, you know, one platform that does everything. Maybe we frame it like this: a best in breed product that you think is actually best in breed, and like you wouldn't get rid of it even if you have vendors that do it, other vendors that do it, right? Like what's like the king of the best in breed in your guys' opinion? Like Clary for forecasting. I know it's super popular. I don't know.
You know, what I found more often with the best in breed comment is also like there's another part of this, which is beyond the functionality of the tool. There's a vendor relationship of like how well are you actually served by the tool itself, even if they're not necessarily like always the best in many capacities. And like name dropping one is like we've had the best relationship with Gong over the last 6 years that we've been customers. And like that includes them speaking on site on a regular basis with us. That includes us doing custom build outs. That includes like quite a bit of like very much hand-holding support through our business lifecycle. And that's, you know, there's a ton of players in that conversational intelligence space. So like there's no shortage of people vying for that same space. But not only have we been pleased with the technology, but like the relationship has really kept us like very entrenched within their business.
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, where the easier you can be as a vendor, the better, right? No one wants work when it comes to, you know, implementing it if it's a nightmare, getting help if it's a nightmare, even just renewing. Like if you know that's going to be a battle, like you're going to shy away from that. So for all the sellers watching, I think that stuff really matters. You heard it from Marshall. Cool. Any questions that we missed here, Kamala? Or are we doing all right?
I think we're doing fairly well, but keep me honest in the chat, folks.
Cool. Okay, let's move on to the next section. The impact of AI. There's so much out there on this right now. Some say they can replace humans. Some say they can't. I think there's a lot of hype. I think there's a lot of things that people could be thinking about right now to be ready for AI in the future. I can't tell you how many calls that we have where someone says, "Hey, we're exploring AI," and executive said that he wants us to start adopting, or he or she wants us to start adopting AI. We don't want to fall behind. And I think there's a lot out there that doesn't really talk about what you should be doing so that AI implementation is successful. So talk about this a little bit. So first, we can start a bit broad. Have you seen opportunities for consolidation through AI adoption? Like what's happening right now with AI that folks can do to kind of help reduce your stack?
Conrad, you want to jump with this one? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. So this is obviously a hot topic in this space right now, and I'm actually excited to talk about a few things that Rippling is doing in this space. One of the big trends I'm seeing is that like a lot of companies, AI is allowing companies to adopt much earlier phased products, I think. And so let me give you one example of what we've done is the company Rippling uses a company called Decagon. It's an generative AI platform for support reps. And what it does is it interfaces with the customer to have a conversation in AI. And then what it can do is actually automatically route tickets to our support team based on the topic of that discussion. And this is a 10-person company, right, that we're using for this. And the question is like, would 5 years ago, would any company at scale trust a 10-person company to run their support channel and route tickets internally? And the answer is like, absolutely not, right? You'd hire a whole bunch of humans, you'd hire a whole bunch of processes internally, additional technologies involved with it. But yet we're running, obviously all of our support engine on a 10-person company software. And so if you ask the question of like, is AI drastically changing the way we adopt software, use it, leverage it, change the way human behavior happens internally or human hiring practices? The answer is like, absolutely yes. And that's just like kind of one key example of how we're doing it. Yeah.
I wish I was in the room for that 10-person startup when they closed the deal. It was just electric.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny. We joke and we look at these chats internally. Like sometimes we'll see the person will ask something funky and see what the AI asks back, and then it eventually like corrects itself. It gets to the bottom of it. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice.
We do have another question, but I want to make sure that I'm framing it correctly. So the question straight up is automation. Is it a help or hindrance in consolidating the tech stack? And I'm trying to figure out, do we mean automated analysis of what we can cut back, or the automations that we add into our systems, are those complicating things? And maybe we just tackle it from those two different angles.
I think it's the latter. So
yeah,
I think it's an interesting thought because it's this topic's consolidation, but I think ultimately you consolidate for cost savings, right? So automation can give you cost savings from an efficiency perspective or a productivity perspective. But it might not help you consolidate your stack itself. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that stuff.
Go ahead, Marshall.
I think automation is it's having a revitalized moment where RPA has existed for a long time, and you had some teams who kind of like took process automation to a really interesting place where they were programming ETL jobs, where they're figuring out kind of how to pull these tools together. But it was a really resource constraint on a lot of businesses. Like you didn't have data engineers, or you didn't have the individuals who could like pull that off necessarily in every business and every team. Where I'm seeing AI pull that forward is upskilling a lot of employees to give them access to kind of like the bare bones tools to pull some of these kind of tools off in a way that they haven't been able to do before. You can take somebody who is modestly good at either programming or just kind of has an idea and get to a fairly producible end result a lot faster than you ever used to be able to get to. And that's kind of where some of the consolidation you're seeing is, where like, hey, there's a bunch of tools that we have that kind of do these spot use cases because they don't do it perfectly, or they don't talk to the system perfectly. Or you have these bridge techs that like help you get data from point A to point B in a way that like doesn't need to exist anymore. AI is pretty good at like normalizing data and pulling things together in an interesting way. So I think the consolidation is also like this ephemera of tech that exists that like supports this use case. you're getting people who are better skilled at their jobs. You're getting technology that can fill that gap programmatically. And you're also getting this kind of like really unique set of tech that comes up out of the woodwork now. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. You have to be careful how much tech automation you build in some of these bespoke technologies that you have, right? And like I think like sometimes I get alarm bells going off when I start to feel like we have put too much responsibility on this one tech and it becomes sticky and difficult to move off of. Like I like to try and remain flexible and dynamic of like if we need to move off or change things. We talked about how we like want to do a new market analysis of what's out there every year. In order to do that and effectively move off these tools, it's like you kind of have to draw that line somewhere of how much automation you build in it. And I think like Salesforce flows have come a really long way. Salesforce is obviously a product that companies aren't going to just trade out overnight, right? So I would really start to like figure out where the automation lives and ensure that you're not building too much critical things outside of things that you want to eventually reevaluate if you're using it internally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were talking about this. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Camel.
Sorry, we have a follow-up that's very related. So how effective have process automation tools been in identifying the areas of technology bloat?
I can jump in here. I'd say it depends on what you're targeting, but in our use case, it's been really effective. And so the pathway though isn't like, hey, we did this process automation and now we know that don't need this vendor anymore. It's actually usually getting down to the individual user level. Like, what is that person doing for their job? And if you say, hey, they put together this 5-hour report a month or something like that, and you walk them through the steps, that's where you really spot like this vendor only exists for this one stage of the process, and we can eliminate that as part of this. But you got to get down to the human level for a lot of these use cases. Like automation is good when you're trying to tackle like mundane, repeatable work in many cases. And that's where you find out like tech was bought very purposely to solve this one stage of a process that probably is outdated at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a fantastic clarification. Thank you.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Conrad and Marshall, but it's like maybe AI isn't necessarily replacing a bunch of tools in your stack, but it might prevent you from buying new tools in the future. Does anyone want to talk a little bit more about that? Like how is that the case? What is AI doing that might prevent? It's just flexible, so you can do more with certain tools, or just feel free to add color.
Yeah, I think AI is still a helper, not a independent operator, right? And so I think it's allowing us to move faster. It's allowing us to be more creative, I think, internally. It's also allowing a lot of companies to build internal solutions at a faster rate that otherwise would have taken a much longer time to do, right? And like I talked about sort of like plug and play machine learning models for like, like we build internally for like account scoring, right? The idea of like account scoring back in the day was, let me build this like Marketo Smart campaign that like adds 1 point every time this account does this like one action, right? And like has tons of gaps in it and problems. And we've come a long way since then. So I think it allows us to move faster and be more creative, but it's still a helper and still requires a human today. The example I gave for support is an area that it potentially could cut human costs and things like that. So there's like, I think today it like lives in some areas to be really effective and independent. And then in some other areas, it still requires a human to drive. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting space. There's, especially in low risk like areas of deployment. Like, so we have bots deployed internally in our company to handle things like IT tickets and to handle a lot of different use cases. We've given people back a massive amount of hours every week to not have to field those themselves. And why that's super useful is those people are now being deployed against more strategic work than just responding to, I forgot my password, I got locked out of my computer. And so there's this level of like AI is really good at that like mundane work today that like we can kind of toss at it, especially if it's repeatable processing. The false hype, I think, is, it's not quite autonomous yet. I think there's still some gaps in its abilities. And you see kind of these really flashy headlines about people kind of like, we replaced our entire support team with AI. And it's like, we all kind of question whether or not that's a great move right now, because it's good. It can be good 90% of the time, but that 10% of the time is like off the wall. So yeah, it's an interesting space. I think it'll advance, and like we're gonna have a very different conversation if we talk 6 months from now about where AI actually is in terms of effectiveness and reliability.
Yeah, you had a great line. It said AI is overhyped right now, but at the same time, it's underhyped. Where it's
Yeah.
like right now, there's a lot of overpromising going on, but I don't think people are really understanding how great it could be in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Chris had a fantastic, sorry, there are so many questions, but this is such a good thing, you all. Chris had a great question about ensuring data integrity when consolidating systems or replacing one. Do you use a data lake,
yeah,
CRM?
Yeah.
I think this is a great transition to the next question. And Chris ended his question with, "Is a data lake critical to the new world of AI?" And I think it's a good transition. What should companies be thinking about right now for adopting AI in the near future? Like, is a data lake one of those things they should be thinking about, or a centralized data store, or whatever it might be? But I'll pass it to you guys, Conrad or Marshall, whoever
Yeah.
wants to take
I'm
it.
a huge proponent of having a single data repository to house things in. And as good, and I think what AI will help with it is structuring the data. Today we have like a ton of internal resources, data engineering and data science resources that connect to new data pipelines, build ETL stuff with Airflow into our warehouse and do a lot of that work. And in a world of AI where, maybe that's like one click of a button to actually set up that data pipeline and start structuring the data, normalizing it, cleaning it, flattening it, doing all of that work that otherwise a human could do. And to the ideal, obviously, North Star is that you have a single data repository that is clean and structured. And then from there, it's all around how do you action that data, right? What do you do with it? What are the things you put in practice? And so I'm a huge proponent of this, and a lot of companies have not done it really well, right? And it's because it's required so much man hours and management of it. And I do think AI will play a pretty critical role in helping companies do this at a faster rate.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think there's two pieces to this. First, operating a warehouse, like a data warehouse for go-to-market has typically been a very, very expensive thing to do, right? You need to roll out a warehouse, you need to have data engineers to build ETL and get the data centralized, to build reverse ETL, to get it back into your systems, new sources that you're adding, even just pulling analysis or pulling a list of contacts you want to market to is something that you need to be able to write SQL to do. And I think to your guys' point earlier, AI sort of brings the barrier down, the technical requirements to do that stuff, because it is very good at data analysis. It's one thing it's very good at. So I think the barrier of adopting sort of this powerful central stack is kind of going down. And the importance of that, I can give you an example. If you think about, there's a lot out there around AI SDRs. And I think if you're going to send a really great email, there's so much context that you need to be able to capture in that email. Like I think back when I was an SDR, I would look at Sales Navigator, I would look at the company profile, I would look at old ops in the account, old ops at the account that the person used to work at. I would look at product usage, and there's a million places to look. And if you want AI to write that email and ignore what a human would ignore and use what a human would use, it needs to be able to access all that data, right? If you just have a little bit of it, that email is not going to be the same. This context, I think, is really king. To me, that example highlights the importance of having all of your data in one place that the AI can use it. Otherwise, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. So that's just a thought. Marshall, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think, on the nature of storing your data centrally, it's not really an option anymore. Like I think you have to start pulling this together to democratize the data. There's some questions in here around kind of like, have data lakes become easier and cheaper to implement? And I think this gets to an interesting place of maybe they don't get cheaper or easier to implement necessarily, but they get more useful over time because like more people can access the data in a ready fashion. You can eke more value out of it. So it feels like it's less of an expense than it may have in the past. The other thing on the, getting people adopting AI is like, there's a lot of really interesting research on how frequently or how often people are using AI in their jobs. And so you've got one study from Microsoft that says 78% of people are bringing AI to work. And you've got another study from Princeton that's saying that like, well, that's maybe true, they only are using it once and then they kind of shy off and only 20% of people are using AI. There's actually this like AI literacy that needs to happen of like, I think if you're not trying to implement some level of tooling or process internally and then really like getting people to understand what this tool can and can't do, demystifying the category as it were, you're missing the boat of like what this next phase of this technology will look like. And so I think the thinking about is like how to get your house in order to make sure that you can make the most out of the tools that are they're coming online or the technology that's coming online. And then the other one is like how to get your people ready for that and make sure you're making the appropriate investments there. Because I think if we get to a state where we are really impressed by AI to be like totally autonomous and no one knows how to use it, we're in a pretty bad spot.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that will getting folks to understand how to use it will also, one, there's a lot of training that has to go into it. And on the other side of it, I think the tools are going to get better. Like prompt engineering is going to get better. Like there are times right now where, you know, I'm a big GPT user and it's like, man, this is going to be kind of hard to get this to spit out what I want it to spit out. Like writing the prompt is going to take as long as it would have taken me to maybe do it manually. But I think that should improve with time too, right? Okay, I like this question. Let's see, MQL and SQL conversion discovery meetings is down 50% over the last 5 years. Why has all this tech not helped that? What do we think's going on there? I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see where you saw that too, Michael. Ripley's doing a little bit okay on that front, so I'm curious about it. But the last 5 years have been a really down market. Companies have cut software, they're consolidating. So I don't know if the last 5 years is like the indicative of what the future is going to be for MQL to say like, you know, opportunity or demo meetings conversions. But I do think that self-service is like a big proponent of this, that the buyer has very little interest in joining a meeting with an SDR, getting past the AE, going through this long sales cycle. And so I do think like self-service is the way of the future and will help solve this problem. But companies have to be faced with the idea that that requires less reps. It requires, you know what I mean, like a lot of internal change management that debunks like historical trends of hire as many reps and go to market and go outbound heavily. And like, I do think the buyer is changing and we are seeing that trend as well. So,
Yeah, I think buyer process changing, like speaking as somebody who was the primary buyer for our business for a long time, I think two things changed over the last few years is one, there's different priorities in businesses now. Like, you know, there isn't this like massive unlimited budget of like, well, we're just going to go try something. It's like we were pretty purposeful about going into a year on this is the stuff we want to buy and want to invest in. And kind of everything else sits in the wings. Like that's just how it's going to go. I think the other thing too, though, is sellers have gotten better in many cases at targeting the right people in a business. So you know, meetings and discoveries might be down, but I can't tell you how many times in the past we saw sellers like meeting with the wrong person. It's like that was a discovery. It's like that person has no buying power, no authority. There's nothing like that's not momentum in the deal. And so
Yeah.
I think we are getting better about finding the right person to like have the discussion with. And so we might be seeing lower volumes on even that front. And I think as people who measure that too, on the other side of the coin, we might be getting better about measuring when that actually is a real meeting versus like a aspirational one.
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit more discipline now too around like flipping it to a stage two, right? Like you're not always just going to hook up your SDR these days. It's like there's a little bit more discipline in that area. Cool. So we have 8 minutes. We can answer some more questions. Does anyone, Conrad or Marshall, anything that you wanted to talk about that you didn't? It's okay if you didn't. We wanted to give you guys an opportunity.
no, I don't think so. I think there was a comment around CDP. I don't have to open up.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, the can of worms of CDP, but I think that's actually falls into the bucket of like what was hot 7 years ago and then has kind of slowly trickled out. This idea was, how do I build this single unified platform that I can access my accounts and people that have all the right signals and touch points on it? And some companies came out that I think personally just I'm not a huge fan of, that really flopped it. And so I think what we've tried to do is build it internally in our warehouse, right? Is just like build our own actual true, let's call it like a TAM, let's call it whatever you want, but build it so that it's clean, it's structured, it houses all the different touch points. We have something internally where we call our marketing touch point data sets, everything from every email click to web visit to form fill to webinar to every possible thing you can imagine on a person and account, all stored and structured in one single place. And so I think CDP actually will make a comeback, but I think CDP will make a comeback with AI and tools that will do it way more effectively than the historical stuff has.
Yeah, I think Nick called it out in the comments. Is like, I don't think we're calling it CDP anymore, but the vision of what that could be might still exist, just in a healthier and probably more sustainable format of how do we pull the data sources together in a more meaningful way. And you see that across different categories, like that hype cycle of interesting sales categories, where it's like the thing was actually a good idea, or like conceptually we all understood that could be an interesting thing for us, but then the branded moniker of it kind of loses its flavor, and we dismiss it kind of wholeheartedly.
Yeah. What is the key difference between kind of the old CDP, like take like a segment, and call it the composable CDP, like the modern data stack, and like ETL warehouse reverse ETL? Like, what's the core difference between those two things? Is it the warehouse, like this like powerful analytical central store, or is it something else?
I think it's more control of the data. I think internally, like Nick commented, the ETL, the warehouse reverse ETL is kind of the new age CDP, and I think like we have more control over how we want to structure the data, format it, change it, action, do things that otherwise these past technologies haven't. I think these past technologies too, you relied on a lot of like out of the box integrations, or you still have to build some script or something to actually use the data. And so in my mind, building internally is like significantly more effective and also just cost effective. Most of these companies already have a warehouse, and then they go buy these CDP tools, and usually
I would argue it
Build.
depends on the skill sets you have in-house as well, and the resources. So if you're a small startup and you don't have the resources, if a platform offers the integrations out of the box, it could cut down on change management and waiting for the schema to be updated. But overall, Conrad and Marshall, I totally agree with you both. I'm the one who made the CDP comment.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Kamala. It's like, but I do think the barrier to implementing the modern data stack is going down with time. I think build versus buy is back in go to market, which is kind of exciting.
For sure. I mean, with tools like Fivetran and whatnot, kind of bridging that ETL gap, I would agree.
Yeah. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, thanks everyone for joining. Marshall and Conrad, thanks so much. I think we can wrap this. Any closing words, Kamala?
I just want to say thank you to everyone here. Please do take the survey to let us know how we do and can improve next time as you exit. And be sure to look for the recording on the RevOpsCoop.com site under Learn and Video Library. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone.